We have seen you play a range of characters, but nothing like Longlegs. What was the inspiration
Hello, Mrs. Jensen.
behind playing a character like this?
You don't have any Snickers in your shopping cart. The neighborhood kids love Snickers on Halloween. Let me help you.
No, our prayers don't help us. Prayers don't do a goddamn thing.
And I heard her voice and the way she would move, and suddenly I thought, I could put all that into this character.
I'm only helping. Snickers.
It was very important to hide the character. It's like you don't want to give the shark away. It allowed me to go to certain places I wouldn't have been comfortable going looking as myself.
Longlegs? Psh, more like short legs, because this movie doesn't go anywhere. If anything, it should be called Long Arms, because you guys are reaching. Nah, I'm just playing. I like this movie quite a bit. Or did I? Let's find out. Longlegs is the latest horror hype train directed by Oz Perkins, son of the famous Psycho star Anthony Perkins. And as some of you probably already know, this is not his first stab at a horror movie, with The Blackcoat's Daughter being a pretty popular one, and I remember liking it a lot when it came out, but I'll be completely honest, I don't remember anything about it other than the fact that there was a big-ass furnace and it was really creepy. But more recently, he made the Gretel and Hansel film, which I liked on a visual level, but I remember having problems with the way the story progressed. Again, don't really remember it that much, but I can definitely say that this man has an eye for creepy visuals, and that was very evident by the trailer, especially the first teaser trailer for this film, which was the only one I had watched, and I'm glad I did, because this is one of those movies where I think the less you know, the better. I'll do my best to not spoil anything going in, so I'll try and keep it vague, but that first trailer, you just see those photographs, you hear that 911 call, you see that creepy cloaked figure, and people on Reddit and online got that screenshot and they brightened it. You can actually see a face underneath the cloth, and it was scary as shit. And the marketing for this movie is just textbook perfect horror movie marketing. Don't give away too much, set the vibe, just creep people out and get people hyped up for the movie. And I think hype is really going to be the main point of contention here, because whenever a new horror movie comes out, people always want to throw on that label of this is the scariest movie ever since, The Exorcist or this and that. And there's this quote that's plastered on every trailer, every poster of, I don't know what critic saying that this is the scariest movie of the past 10 years. And I'm just going to answer that question now. Is it or is it not? Most definitely not. And I think the hype is hurting this movie quite a bit. And I'm not saying that this movie is perfect, but it has some issues. But I think the main issue, honestly, is the overhype. But hey, that's what sells a movie. We're going to get down into the nitty-gritty of what my issues are. But other than the trailers and the word of mouth, the real star of this film that's driving that hype is the mystery surrounding Nicolas Cage's involvement. If you don't like Nick Cage, you probably won't like this movie. If you love Nick Cage, you probably will love this movie. I mean, while he's not in it very long, Nick Cage just has this allure, this fandom, this, meme kingdom surrounding him. And there's been somewhat of a renaissance recently with, things like Mandy and of course Pig. Love him or hate him, you gotta admit he's very versatile. So the fact that there's a new movie that's supposed to be super scary and there's a mystery Nicolas Cage role, that's enough to bank a movie. So let's get into the story. Set in the 1990s, Longlegs follows an FBI agent named Lee Harker, played by Micah Monroe. She is tasked with tracking down an occultist serial killer responsible for murdering multiple families across America over the past decade. However, this mysterious killer by the name Longlegs seemingly kills his victims without ever having been physically present in the crimes. So I think the first question everyone wants to know is this movie scary? Now that's a very subjective thing, and when you ask someone what does it mean to be scared, the answer is going to also be very different. Some people, being jumped, startled, that is scary. To other people, it's the atmosphere, the mood, the dreadful feeling that invokes a sense of fear. For other people, it's how long do you think about it after the movie's done? You know, there's a lot of things that can be considered scary. There's plenty of non-horror movies that are scary, and there's plenty of horror films that aren't particularly scary. But to me, what matters more than whether or not a movie is scary is if it has a good atmosphere, and most importantly, is it interesting? That's really what it's about. Is it not boring? That's really the most important thing for me. And personally, even though this movie's a little slow, I was never really bored. I was always interested. I was always scanning around the screen. I was really enjoying the sound design, and I gotta give it up for the cinematographer of this film. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but I believe his name is Andre Orochi, and apparently this is his debut, which is very impressive because this does not feel like a debut motion picture for a cinematographer. It really feels pro. Another thing too is that this movie was shot on film. And I know for some people it's not a big deal, but I really do think it adds to the texture. And the fact that this movie is a period piece set in the 90s, and it also covers a lot of stuff from the 80s, I think the film look, that kind of grain, that texture, does add to it. And the dark scenes definitely benefit from film versus digital. I didn't mean to go off track. I kind of danced around the question I just asked. But so for me personally, I do think this movie was pretty scary. I'm not gonna lie. Now, I'm a little easily manipulated, and while I'm not religious or super superstitious, I'm just superstitious enough. I have just enough, religious fear from my childhood that there's elements of this movie that definitely kind of freaked me out, and I'm gonna get so cooked for this, but I did have nightmares about this movie for like the first couple nights after I watched it. But again, I think it's just because I like getting into that headspace. With any horror movie, it's just as much about what you don't see as well as what you do see. And this movie loves to play with the empty space in the background. I mean, there's one shot where some creepy shit goes down, and this main character is reading a letter, and there's this total open space in the background. You have two doorways on either side of her, and you're just the whole time like, oh my God, something's gonna happen. I'm not going to say whether or not something does, but that's kind of besides the point. It's really about the anticipation, and it's really about the dread and just the mood and, playing with sound on, either side, and that space, working in that environment that really works well in this film. Speaking of world building, considering that this is a period piece set in the 90s, they don't go out of their way to make it feel super 90s. Like, there isn't any weird, inappropriate nostalgia baiting or anything like that. But I do find one funny detail in this film is that there's a scene that takes place in an office, and there's just this giant poster of Clinton on the wall. And there's another scene where it flashes back to the 80s, and then there's a giant ass poster of Reagan on the wall. And it's like just little visual cues like that let you know what time period this is set in. And I had a little chuckle, I won't lie. As for our cast, I think everyone did great in their roles for the most part. Nicolas Cage is definitely going to be incredibly divisive. I found him mostly working for the film, but I almost wish I didn't know he was in this, because sometimes it was a little distracting. I could see underneath the persona. I could feel the Nicolas Cage coming out. And yes, there is a loud freak out scene in this where he's screaming, and I did kind of giggle, even though I do find his performance scary and intimidating at parts, and I still ultimately could buy into it. I enjoyed it. I can't help but wonder if this would have worked better with an unknown. And I can't really get too deep into it without spoiling what his character is, what it's about, how it relates to the film. But, I think if you've seen the movie, you might feel the same way I do. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you found his performance distracting, or if you enjoyed it and you thought it lent itself to the film. But I will say there are a lot of scenes where they choose to shoot a certain character ambiguously, and you don't really get to get a good look at this particular antagonist. All that worked for me. I think there's a certain point in the film where things start to get revealed, a little bit of that mystery is being peeled back, and I don't know, it just kind of lost some of its flair. And of course, I have to touch on Micah Monroe, who is best known for It Follows, which is a personal favorite of mine. I really love that movie. She does a great job for what she's given, but I will say her character might not work for everyone. She's very quiet, very stoic, doesn't really emote anything more than fear and then a lot of pondering and staring, just kind of generic detective stuff. And I will say at first her character was like immediately in my head, I was like, this person's autistic as hell. I was like, this person is on the spectrum, and for those of you Mobile Suit Gundam fans out there, you would refer to her as a new type. It's going to be another one of those, if you've ever watched any cop shows or FBI shows or detective shows, there's a stereotype, there's an archetype of that, autistic genius. And, I was kind of going along with it, but there are some more things revealed about this character that I think changed the meaning behind some of the performance and the way she's acting. I can't really get into it, but I do think there's a little bit more going for this character under the surface that some people might not appreciate at first. So again, I liked the performance, but I do think that this is one of those movies where it's not really a character driving the story, it's a story driving the character, which I guess makes sense for a mystery thriller, but I don't know. There's other movies like Silence of the Lambs and Seven where it feels just a bit more character driven, and I think that might be an issue for some people. Another performance that I think really elevates this movie is Blair Underwood, who plays the chief, and her boss who goes along with her on this journey. And this movie is very dreadful, very dark, very upsetting, but it's not without humor. What humor is there is very understated, very dry, but I think it works, and there's a contrast between these two characters that I really liked, and where this character goes towards the end, I think was kind of clever and satisfying. A lot of people would label this movie as elevated horror. That's a buzzword that goes around a lot for things, produced by A24, Neon, and just really any horror that seems to kind of give a shit and not just fall into all the Hollywood tropes. And, this movie, I think, has a lot going for it, but I will say I was a little kind of not disappointed, but a little annoyed by some of the jump scares in this movie. Like, there are quite a few scenes where you have that loud shriek, right? Or, loud banging. And it's fun, but I wish they found ways to scare the audience without needing those musical cues. I don't know. I'm not a huge jump scare person, but I will say I still had fun seeing this in a theater and jumping with the audience. I mean, it is fun, but it's one of those things where on repeat viewings, I think kind of gets annoying. So I love the atmosphere. I love the sound design. I think the performances are good. And overall, I found the story very interesting. However, I think really what let me down with this film was the kind of, I guess, way it wrapped up. It's not necessarily where the story went that I didn't like, but more so the way they went about it. With a mystery film, you want that aha moment. You want that satisfying, cathartic moment at the end where things start getting revealed and you go, oh, this makes sense. You start piecing it together, whether it be a twist, whatever it is. And this movie, there comes a point at the end where there's this long monologue, this story that kind of just explains everything. And it almost felt like the movie showed you a series of, creepy or interesting scenes. And then they're like, and then this is what happened and what it meant. All right, see you later. And I'm like, really? Like, that's it? Okay. I think for me, even though I found some elements of the story kind of disappointing at the end and the way they're presented, the overall production value, the acting, the atmosphere, and just the whole full package was enough to bump it up and elevate it for me. So if I had to slap a rating on this, I probably would give this, I probably would give it a 7 out of 10. It's, it's not quite a 6, definitely not an 8, because the production was really great, and I did have fun watching it, and I think it's a movie I might enjoy more on a second viewing. And I definitely think for sure it was overhyped. And admittedly, just to kind of expose my taste, I do enjoy things that dabble in atmosphere. And even if the story is rocky or the characters are weak, if I'm able to kind of sit and just feel the mood or the vibe of the movie, I tend to enjoy it just because film is a different medium of entertainment as opposed to a novel, etc. So again, if you like creepy shit, I think this would be a fun movie, whether in theaters or whether you wait until you're at home, turn out the lights, turn up the speaker. I think it's still fun. I think it's enjoyable, but it's not nearly as great as people say it is. So I think it's really, really good, but just shy of being something great. So yeah, I think I'm going to stick with a 7 out of 10. And with that, now it's time to get into spoilers, because admittedly, I just kind of wanted to get past all that shit so I could talk to you guys who did watch the movie and get into the nitty gritty and try and start analyzing shit and pointing things out and really get into my actual complaints.
I'm a vampire! I'm a vampire! I'm a vampire! I'm a vampire!
So my biggest complaint with this film, and it's something that I touched on in reviews for some of my other movies involving paranormal stuff, is, well, I love, movies with paranormal elements. I like occult stuff. I do find it scary. I do think demons and shit like that are scary, even though it's an overdone trope. The main issue with films that use these kind of archetypes is they often don't establish clear rules and boundaries and limits to what these things can do, and they don't let the audience understand how it works, which I know, again, ruins some of the mystique and mystery. However, if you don't understand the rules and logic, it kind of just feels like anything can happen, and sometimes makes things feel like they're random. And I think a really good example of that would be something like Talk to Me, right? Talk to Me involved ghosts. They spend a lot of time establishing what that embalmed hand can do, and they explain the rules of the game, etc. And it really makes the stakes feel real because you understand along with the characters what's going on, and so when shit goes crazy, you're like, uh-oh, they need to do this, or this is going wrong. You need those rules and that world to really, again, feel the stakes. You want some mystery, of course. You want to keep some stuff hidden and leave people imagining shit. But in this movie, once they start establishing the dolls, there's lots of interesting elements. For example, like the metal ball that they find inside the head. The coroner, the morgue or whatever, the autopsy FBI room, he's talking about how there's, seemingly nothing inside. However, he kept thinking about his ex-wife every time he was around it. And when he put up, that little scanner up to it, it was resonating this strange sound. And you're thinking, oh, this thing is like clearly influencing people around it. And then towards the end of the film, you see the head of one of the dolls get cracked, and you see that black, like mist coming out, and it's like, okay, so is that someone's soul? Is that the demon? Is this like a Horcrux situation where Longlegs is putting himself into the balls, or balls, lol. So is Longlegs putting a piece of himself in all this and making himself immortal? Like, how did this all start, right? And so they explain to you, okay, Longlegs is this dude, and he's, creepy and weird, and he's, a Satan worshiper, and you get the impression that he might be a product of the Satanic Panic era of Satanism in the 80s, and, he clearly is into, metal and, music, and, even he has this kind of glam rock look, and I read that the reason why they wanted him to look weird is that he kept getting plastic surgery on top of plastic surgery on top of plastic surgery. They don't explain that in the film. They don't explain any of this shit. They don't explain where he's from. So you're just kind of left to wonder, okay, who is this guy and how is he doing the things he's doing? Okay, he's making a deal with the devil. Okay, why does the devil need dolls to control people? They don't explain that shit. What is inside the balls in their head? They don't really explain that shit. You just know it's controlling people, it's getting a hold of people, etc. The whole idea is that Longlegs was able to commit crimes without actually having to be there. However, they revealed that the mother was in fact the one helping him because she was being held hostage and trying to protect her daughter, right? And that's fine and all, but would they not find her fingerprints all over everything? Would they have not found hair samples? You know what I mean? It's like, who wrote the letters? Was it the demon? Did the mother write the letters? It's like, hello. Once you start actually really thinking about the logistics of it, it's kind of broken down. And I know, again, you're dealing with the devil, you're dealing with demons, but you really got to get specific and lay out, okay, this is how it's going down. At least for me, I think. And that's why it started to fall apart at the end. Earlier in the review, of course, I mentioned how Micah Monroe's character was very autism-coded, and you could tell that she was, something was off with her, and she had these supernatural powers, etc. I do think it's kind of cool, and I'm not sure if everyone caught this. However, technically speaking, she probably doesn't actually have psychic abilities. A lot of the reason why she knows so much and is so intuitive is because she has the same connection to the dolls that all these other people do, so she can probably resonate or feel the demonic entity, the devil, whatever, because she's still connected to that ritual, literally. Like, you know, she had that spell cast over her, and why she's so quiet and to herself, one, is probably because of the trauma, but also two, because she literally is capped and being held within a doll, her psyche, part of her psyche at least, and is kind of being controlled, which kind of begs the question: how was she able to become an FBI agent and get to this place in the first place? Was it always part of the plan? Is it literally just this big ploy to fuck with her? Which is pretty demented, and while convoluted, almost makes it even more cruel because it's so twisted. But I didn't feel like we really got a definitive answer of what this whole ritual was about. You know, was Longlegs trying to be immortal? Was he just, again, did he just take pleasure in this? Was he also being controlled? Was his mind also being controlled? Again, maybe these are things I would have picked up through a second viewing. But still, again, it was just kind of messy, kind of convoluted, and it felt needlessly complicated. Another thing that kind of feeds into this series, the mother, of course, is trying to protect her daughter, and it seems like she wants to tell her something, but she can't, and she says, "Oh, I kept everything in your room. I left everything the way it was," and it almost begs the question: was she hoarding things and being like that just in hopes one day that her daughter would figure out what's going on? There's another scene as well where she's on the phone with her daughter and she's asking her, "Are you saying your prayers?" And she says, "No, they scare me." And it made me wonder, were the prayers chants or rituals that were taught to her to help this demonic entity keep control over her? Or was it actual genuine prayers the mother taught her to try and protect her from the devil? There's lots of little things sprinkled throughout this movie that I think have more significance, and that I think through multiple viewings I would be able to piece together more. But I did find this movie more frustrating than satisfying with these mysteries. But again, I could just be a complete dumbass. I could be stupid and just missing something. There are other thematic lines that I thought were kind of cool, like Longlegs always referencing living downstairs because he was literally living underneath her feet, but at the same time, that also is a reference to the devil. I was kind of disappointed to find out that Longlegs actually doesn't have any significance. The name, I mean. They just chose the name Longlegs because it sounded creepy. But I always thought that it was in reference to Daddy Longlegs, and he is kind of somewhat of a twisted stepfather figure in a sense. And this is where my theory comes in. This was my interpretation. I haven't really looked into it, but I felt like this movie was kind of a commentary on abusive fathers and on male violence towards families, because if you didn't already know, the person most likely to murder you in your life isn't going to be a stranger. It's actually going to be someone you know statistically. And there are tons and tons and tons of, really a sickening amount of true crime stories about fathers going insane and killing their family, their children, for whatever reason. And so this theme of, fathers going insane and killing people, and of Longlegs forcing himself, maybe not sexually, but just in general, forcing himself on the mother, threatening to hurt the child if she doesn't do what he says, kind of, burrowing in their house and living, and ruining their lives and kind of being a parasite. I felt like it kind of had this theme of abusive fathers. The whole idea that this evil force is influencing these people to do things without anyone actually having to come and make them do it also kind of feeds into the whole idea of the passing of mental illness or, trauma. And when you think about it, someone who's getting into a relationship or they're getting married, they're having children, it starts off at this loving thing, and the thought that this could somehow end up with someone literally murdering all the people closest to them, something that actually happens in real life. It's mind-boggling. To try and solve this case of violence, this pattern, is almost like trying to fight the devil itself. It's something so deeply rooted, so dark, that it's really not even comprehensible. And that's kind of the vibe I was getting from this movie. Maybe I'm thinking too much into the wrong direction. I know that Oz Perkins, the writer, had mentioned that this was actually more so about his mother and about lying, which definitely makes sense. I did feel this kind of this theme of male violence. Maybe that's just me looking too deep into it, but I don't know. I mean, it's an FBI thriller about a serial killer who makes fathers kill their whole family. So I mean, I don't think it's that much of a stretch. And the standout scene in this movie is the interrogation scene. I just gotta say, him singing Happy Birthday has to be the worst Happy Birthday ever since Breaking Bad. I also found it kind of funny how there's a scene where they're playing the tape of the interview of Longlegs, and he's on the TV, like actually talking to people in the room through the camera or whatever. It's like creepy, the scariest shit you've ever seen, right? If you were an FBI agent, and then they just turn on the lights like it's the end of a PowerPoint, and he goes, "Well, time for lunch." Like everyone just gets up. I would be sitting there in that office chair like, man, what the fuck? Like, are you guys not freaking out about this? I guess it's just another day at the office, but I just found it so funny. Creepy, but also kind of funny. Another annoying thing about Agent Lee Harker was also, too, there's a scene where Longlegs actually stalks her and gets into her house to leave a note. It's a very tense scene, and she gets the note, and the whole time I was thinking, oh, she's going to go to the, run to the office, or she's going to call for backup. They're going to show up, before he leaves or whatever, and she's going to explain what happens. But never once does she mention that Longlegs got into her house. That is never brought up, and it was bugging me the whole time until eventually, they reveal that she's kind of under a spell or mind control. So I'm like, oh, that must have been suppressing her. But I gotta admit, there was a long part of the runtime where I was like, girl, tell them what's going on. Like, tell them that he was in your house, and it never happens. And I found that so frustrating, even though there kind of is an explanation for why, and there is quite literally a demon whispering to her throughout the whole movie, so I guess it does make sense, but I did find it very frustrating. And lastly, with the climax of the film, I do think it was great that they were talking about birthdays the whole movie, and she goes to meet her boss's kid, and she invites her to the birthday, and it comes full circle to the round of the film with the final, killing being at the birthday party. She opens the door with the agents, and they're acting really weird, and you immediately know, uh-oh, it's already started. That was great. Perfect climax. But then the way it goes down, it just really annoyed me. So Lee Harker, right? I've already mentioned she's a shy, timid, quiet character, very autism-coded, and you find out that she's under this kind of spell or control. However, she did show some competence and strength and bravery throughout the movie as an agent. In the opening scene, you see her partner get shot right in front of her, and she was literally like, "This house is fucked. Don't go into it. We need backup." And he's like, whatever. Knock, knock, knock. Boom, gets shot. That was a great jump scare. She freaks out, but then she gathers herself, and then she just goes right in with her gun drawn, just ready. Like a badass. She probably should have called backup first. But anyways, she's ready for action. Even though she was clearly scared as shit, she went in anyways, guns blazing, right? And then, of course, same thing with her house. Her space gets invaded. She doesn't lock the door, sit in the corner, and cry with 911 on the phone, like, ooh. No. She's like, even though she's clearly visibly terrified, she grabs her gun from her desk, goes outside, starts scanning the house, and is like, no, I'm not letting this shit happen to me right now. Very satisfying to see, your badass female horror movie lead. And come towards the end of the film, right, she arrives at the house, and you see the chief, his wife, and the kid, and then her mother. They're all under the spell. And you're like, oh shit, it's going down. And what happens? She sits in the chair and just slowly lets everything unravel until the very last minute. And it was so annoying and so just disappointing for me. I totally get being frozen and petrified, but after everything she had seen and been through, and after everything she knows, you would think she would be more proactive. To see this character who is acting pretty brave and ballsy towards the beginning, to suddenly just kind of be petrified, I'm like, girl, you're an FBI agent. Fucking do something. Like, And I get it, it's conflicting because that's her mother. She doesn't want to hurt her mother. But the whole time I was thinking, wait a minute. When her mother shot the head of the doll, it, made her faint and pass out and kind of freed her from this spell. At least that's how I interpreted this scene, unless I'm interpreting it wrong. So she's sitting in a room, right? She sees the father, the mother, the daughter, her mom, and I immediately was like, blow the head off that doll right now. Like, unleash them from this spell. And again, that's how I thought this was working. And maybe I'm wrong, because what happens is the father is like, all right, we're going to go into the kitchen and grab the cake. And the mother was like, all right, let's go. and she's like, oh, we'll be right back. He says, no, I'll be right back. You're staying in the kitchen. And like, that was a cold line. I won't lie. That was a scary, fucked up line. And that's when I thought, she's not going to let this happen. At the last minute before he does it, she's going to either shoot the doll or she's just going to have to shoot her mother. Nope. Instead, you just hear, I was like, what the fuck? I was like, why are you letting this happen? Your friend, your partner, murder the shit out of his wife in the other room and do nothing. Don't shoot him in the leg. Don't shoot, whatever. You just listen to her getting nuked in the other room. I'm like, what the fuck? And of course, he comes back covered in blood, ready to murder the daughter. And she's sitting there like with the gun, like, oh, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, oh my God, like, it just kill someone. Help them out. And she certainly does. She shoots him and then shoots her mother and then tries to shoot the doll. When she gets around to the doll, the clip is empty. And this whole time I'm thinking, this could have gone down way better if you just weren't incompetent as shit. And I don't know, it just felt like a betrayal of that character. And I don't want anyone to be confused. It's not that I don't like dark, mean-spirited endings. I'm okay with that. I mean, I loved Hereditary, and Hereditary is so upsetting and twisted. And then, of course, Frank Darabont's adaptation of Stephen King's The Mist, The Mist, the movie. That ending, oof. Oh my God, right? That's not the issue. I'm not like, oh, the good guy should have won. It's not like that. Totally fine with a character losing and an ending being dark. But this just felt dumb, if that makes sense. I think you could have had the same thing happen. What would have been better, right? If she got to the house and it was too late. He already started or whatever. But for her to watch it all unfold in front of her and not do anything and just sit there and be like, it was, I don't know. It was kind of annoying. Maybe after rewatches, I'll pick up things and be like, oh, wait, this is why she couldn't do it. But I still think the movie failed on a certain level to really properly deliver its information. And I think it just should have had more clear-cut rules, and it should have been pieced together a little better. So I love the way it's shot. I love the atmosphere. I think the performances are great. Yes, even Nicolas Cage, for as conflicting as it is, I still found it very enjoyable and fun to watch. It was interesting. I liked, the overall abstract story, but it's the glue. It needed more glue to kind of just put it all together. Maybe this is closer to a 6 than a 7. I don't know. Maybe I should have given it a 6.5, but I still really enjoyed it. If I was with someone who hadn't seen it before and they're like, oh, I want to watch Longlegs, I'll be like, oh, cool, let's watch it. I would enjoy watching it again. Maybe I'll get more out of it through another viewing. But for now, that's kind of my mixed feelings on it. I definitely think it was overhyped, but I still think it's worth watching. And while it may not be for everyone, I do think everyone should give it a try. So with that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you for the next overhyped movie.
There she is.